Hey everybody, our horror movie for today is Cure by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. It came out in 1997 and it is one of the major pillars of the new wave of Japanese horror that came out in the 90s and early 2000s. That, along with another film from the director called Pulse, as well as Ring or Ringu, Ju-On, The Grudge, along with a couple others like Audition and Ichi the Killer, all were part of this kind of new wave of Japanese cinema. Kiyoshi Kurosawa is arguably the most influential of all of them. His films have a very specific logic to them. They are based entirely in tone and mood and tension. The bare basic plot: a serial killer is on the loose and is using other people to do the killings for him. A detective named Takabe gets put on the case. What transpires is one of the most unsettling and tense horror movies. First off, the way he uses sound in this movie is absolutely incredible. There's almost no score except for the opening song, which is an incredible use of juxtaposing tone, where the song is kind of uplifting and happy. It almost reminds me of something that would have been in a film like Kikujiro. It's very happy and uplifting and sort of bouncy. And it underscores a scene of a guy brutally beating a woman with a pipe. And then it cuts to a detective driving to the murder scene, and the title card pops up on his drive with that playful music playing. It's really a great way to use a song that, juxtaposes the mood of the film so well, and it's very impactful. But otherwise, there's a song at the end of the film, and primarily through the rest of the movie, instead of having a soundscape of music, the soundscape is everything diegetic around you. A washing machine being turned on, room tone, opening a door, footsteps, all the sound is heightened to such a point that it kind of makes you uneasy just from its soundscape alone. I don't want to go too much into spoiling this movie for you, because I think everyone should see this movie and experience it for themselves, because it's just one of the great films and one of the great serial killer movies ever, let alone being a horror film. It's also one of those rare films that gets better upon subsequent viewings. The first time I saw it, I thought it was really interesting. The second time I saw it, I realized it was a very special film. The third time I saw it, I figured out it was a true masterpiece. And as I keep watching it, I'll probably learn more and more about it. I think that's a sign of a really great film, where you don't fully grasp it because so much is happening that you can't understand until you get the fuller picture and then can come back and look at it. It's a great example of a film that begs to be rewatched and rewards you for rewatching it, which I think is just the biggest compliment a film could get, outside of longevity and being in the Criterion Collection, which it is. And you can go stream it right now on the Criterion channel, depending on when you watch this video, at least. The movie's a two-hander between the detective, Takabe, played expertly with a boiling rage and emotion that's just waiting to come up, by Koji Yakusho, who you may know from the original Shall We Dance film. This is a great film, and you should go check that out also. The killer, or hypnotist, whatever you want to call him, is named Mamiya, and he's played by Masato Hagiwara. Both actors are just incredible in it. Kurosawa goes on to use Koji Yakusho in quite a few other films, but he's never used Masato Hagiwara again, the guy who plays Mamiya. And to quote him in one of the special features, that the performance was so intense and so committed that he gave for Mamiya, and it was so unsettling to the director himself, he could never separate him enough from the role to give him another role. And I totally get it. I think it is one of the most interesting and disturbing and fresh takes on a killer character, and he does it so well. It's so endearing and also just frustrating. He's got amnesia, and he also has psychic powers. There's a whole underlying storyline in this movie about people with psychic abilities, including the detective's wife, who we see in the opening of the movie taking a test about reading Bluebeard, which I'm not sure the significance of Bluebeard yet, but I'm going to figure that out. She then moves a cup with her mind. You realize that she has a similar power to that of Mamiya. Mamiya doesn't have any memory. He is complete amnesiac, and he uses that to his advantage. He uses it to manipulate people, and he uses it as a part of his method of hypnotism. That's his way of getting people to kill, is he uses hypnotic suggestion. And the way in which he uses hypnotic suggestion in the film has different methods and different layers to it. He always starts out prodding you with questions. He never answers questions about himself. He only wants to hear about other people. And he really aggressively gets them into it through using his amnesia to forget and re-ask questions over and over again, to asking personal questions and then knowing the answer to them because he's quite psychic too. And he slowly works people down until he busts out one of his visual tools. That is really what gets people hypnotized and hooked on. His primary one is a lighter. He flicks the lighter and gets people to stare at it and is able to talk them into doing whatever he wants them to do. But if that doesn't work, he can use water, the slow stream of it sliding down a floor, the drip of it out of a faucet, the mise-en-scène of the movie. And yet every time you see one, it kind of codes into your brain that maybe you're now being hypnotized as well. And the film is quite hypnotic to kind of go into that. It's this just painful and really hard to win kind of scenario. And I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but it's absolutely magnificent. The way in which they get to it is mind-blowingly impressive. There are a lot of long takes in this movie. The most impressive one to me is this scene where Mamiya and the detective Takabe finally meet, and Takabe gets to attempt to get information out of him. And what happens is, of course, it gets flipped on him, and Mamiya gets him to start talking about his wife. And over time, Takabe just breaks down and loses it and starts screaming about how hard it is to take care of his wife and the medical issues she has and what a burden she's been on him the whole time. And even though he spends this whole film fighting this guy and his ability to control people and knowing how that works, he still gets broken down eventually, and that is when Mamiya is able to get to him. It's really impressive the way the film uses a specific method to hypnotize people. It's kind of ingrained into the film's grammar itself, too. A lot of the way the film feels and moves is in line with the way he hypnotizes people. Kiyoshi Kurosawa is like the master of Japanese horror. He got to start doing Yakuza films for this small studio. Then he wrote Cure, and it changed his career. He became one of the fathers of this new wave of Japanese horror cinema, and he became really the name that everyone brings up when you think about this type of horror film. His movies always have this muted color palette to it for the most part. Although Cure has some really beautiful dramatic lighting and shots, he always opts for a long take over cutting. He doesn't really use coverage at all. The camera moves are always intentional, and a lot of the times he'll play out a scene in a single take and let it move into multiple shots, which is always a beautiful technique. Also, the length of his shots is very long. The movie does not cut quickly. It breathes. It really lets you sit in the tension and dread of this movie. The movie just knows how to unsettle you, both temporally, orally, visually. It's got kind of everything working for it. When a master filmmaker is utilizing every piece of the craft so expertly, and it's using the plot itself to inform the way in which the film is being shot and heard and seen, it's really special. Movies like this don't come along all the time. It's one of my all-time favorite horror movies, and I think you all need to go see it. And I bet a lot of you have, and if you have, please let me know. Tell me in the comments, send me a message. I want to know what you guys think of Cure also, because there's a lot to discuss about the movie that I did not bring out in here, but I'd love to discuss it with people who have seen the film so we can discuss the entirety of the plot, because it's a difficult plot, and the first time you watch it, you're not going to get it all. It's pretty impossible. But watch it a second time, watch it a third time, and I promise you're going to see one of the best, most rewarding horror films of the modern era of film. Although now that I say modern era of film, I realize this movie is quite old now. Fun factoid, Oscar-winning filmmaker Ryusuke Hamaguchi, who did the incredible Drive My Car, was a student of Kiyoshi Kurosawa's, and to this day idolizes him and says he was one of the biggest influences on his career. So to say that this guy's films are influential is an understatement. Also, this is one of those films where, because he was making a new film and was a pretty early filmmaker, because there wasn't a large budget, because there were all these things that gave him a lot of freedom. He was able to make a movie that was truly original, which is very rare these days. We need more original films. We need more original stories. This is not based on a book. This is just an original, incredible horror film. And anybody can watch it and should watch it. And if you're going to watch any horror movie I suggest to you on this list, I would argue that this one would be the first one to watch. I just think it's got so much depth to it, and it's such a engrossing film. It will suck you in and you will not stop thinking about it. And it's also one of those horror films that I think transcends the genre and makes it relatively accessible to people who do not like horror films, because the film work is so good and the movie does not play in cheap scares, but it is unsettling as hell. Anyways, I hope you enjoy. Let me know what you think of the movie. See you next time.